Keiko Tanaka sat on the cold subway platform, her fingers stiff from the winter air. She opened her small piano case and placed it on the ground in front of her. The morning rush was about to begin, and she hoped to make enough money for breakfast and lunch. She had been doing this for 3 years now, playing piano in the subway stations of New York City. She was 28 years old and came from Japan. Back home in Kyoto, everyone said she was gifted. Her parents saved money for years to send her to music school. She went to the best music school in Tokyo and learned to play piano like a master. Her teachers said she could be famous one day. But here in America, nobody seemed to care about her music. Keiko pressed the keys of her small electric piano. The sound was not as good as a real piano, but it was all she could afford. She started playing a sad song by Chopin. The music filled the dirty subway tunnel. A few people stopped to listen, but most just walked by quickly. They were busy going to work and had no time for music. After 2 hours, Keiko counted her money. She had made $12. It was not enough. She needed at least $30 every day just to survive. Her rent was due in 5 days, and she was still $200 short. She felt tired and worried. Keiko packed up her piano and walked to her small apartment in Queens. The building was old and the walls were thin. She could hear her neighbors fighting and their television playing loudly. Her apartment was very small. It had one room that was her bedroom, living room, and kitchen all together. The bathroom was so tiny she could barely turn around in it. She looked at the stack of bills on her small table. Electric bill, phone bill, subway card money, and food. Everything cost so much money in New York City. Sometimes she ate only one meal a day to save money. She had lost weight since coming to America. Her mother would be worried if she could. See her now, Keiko remembered the day she decided to come to New York. She was 25 and working at a music school in Kyoto. She taught piano to children, but the pay was very low. She dreamed of playing in big concert halls and recording albums. Her teacher told her that America was the place where dreams come true. He said if she was good enough, she could make it there, but America was harder than she thought. First, she had trouble with her visa. The paperwork was confusing and expensive. She had to hire a lawyer who took most of her savings. Then she found out that her Japanese music degree was not accepted by many American schools. She would have to study again and pay thousands of dollars. Without money for school, Keiko tried to find work. But most places wanted someone who spoke perfect English. Her English was good, but not perfect. She had an accent that made some people not understand her. Other places wanted someone with American experience. How could she get American experience if no one would give her a chance? She found small jobs playing piano at restaurants and hotels. The pay was very low, maybe $50 for a whole evening. Sometimes the manager would not pay her at all, saying not enough people listened to her music. She was too scared to argue because she needed the work. Keiko also worked other jobs to make money. She cleaned offices at night, worked at a coffee shop in the morning, and played piano when she could. She was always tired. Her hands hurt from cleaning and her back ached from standing so long. But she kept going because she still had hope. In the evenings, when she was not working, Keiko would practice on her small keyboard. She used headphones so she would not bother her neighbors. The keyboard only had 66 keys, not the 88 keys of a real piano. Some of her favorite songs could not be played properly on it, but she practiced anyway, keeping her fingers strong and her memory sharp. Sometimes she went to music stores just to touch real pianos. The salespeople would watch her carefully, knowing she could not afford to buy anything. But when they were not looking, she would press a few keys and remember what real music sounded like. The sound was so much richer and more beautiful than her small keyboard. Keiko often thought about going back to Japan. Her parents wrote letters asking when she would come home. They said she could have her old teaching job back. It would be safe and steady money. She could live with them and save money. But something inside her said not to give up yet. She had been in America for 3 years now. Her visa would expire in 6 months. If she could not find a way to stay legally, she would have to leave. The thought scared her. Going back felt like admitting she had failed. All the money her parents spent, all the dreams she had would be wasted that afternoon. Keiko went to her second job at a small cafe in Manhattan. She played piano during lunchtime for the customers. The owner, Mr. Peterson, was a kind man who let her play even though it did not bring in much business. He paid her $40 for 3 hours of playing. Most customers ignored her music. They were busy eating and talking on their phones. Sometimes she felt invisible, like she was just background noise. But she played her best anyway. Her grandmother always told her to do everything with pride, even if no one was watching. After work, Keiko walked through the streets of Manhattan. She looked at the big buildings and bright lights. Somewhere in this city were the famous concert halls she dreamed of playing in. Carnegie Hall, Lincoln Center, places where the greatest musicians in the world performed. They seemed so far away from her small life. She stopped in front of a music school and looked at the pictures of students in the window. They all looked young and happy and rich. She wondered if any of them had to choose between eating dinner and paying for subway fare. Probably not. As she walked to the subway station, Keiko made a decision. She would not give up yet. She had 6 months left on her visa. That was enough time to try one more time. Maybe something would change. Maybe someone would finally notice her music. She had to believe it was possible because without hope, she had nothing left. The Plaza Hotel job was different from Keiko's usual work. She had never played at such a fancy place before. The manager called her that morning and said their regular piano player was sick. They needed someone right away for the evening cocktail hour. The pay was better than usual, $150 for 4 hours. Keiko arrived at the hotel early to practice. The piano was beautiful, a black grand piano that shined under the soft lights. When she pressed the keys, the sound was perfect. Rich and clear, nothing like her small keyboard at home. She felt excited for the first time in months. The hotel lobby was full of expensive furniture and fresh flowers. Everything was clean and elegant. Keiko felt out of place in her simple black dress, but she tried to look confident. She had borrowed the dress from her neighbor, because she did not own anything fancy enough for this job. As people began to arrive for cocktails, Keiko started playing. She chose soft, beautiful music that would not disturb the conversations. Most of the guests looked wealthy. The women wore expensive jewelry and the men had expensive watches. They drank wine that probably cost more than Keiko made in a week. For the first hour, no one paid attention to her music. This was normal. People came to these events to see each other, not to listen to piano music. Keiko did not mind. She was happy just to play on such a beautiful piano, but then something changed. Keiko decided to play one of her favorite pieces, by Chopin. It was a sad and beautiful song that always made her think of home. As she played, she forgot about the crowd and the hotel. She just felt the music flowing through her fingers. When she finished the song, she heard someone clapping. She looked up and saw a man standing near the piano. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with gray hair and an expensive suit. He was the only person who had stopped talking to listen to her music. The man walked over to the piano. He was tall and looked important. His clothes were perfect and his shoes were shiny. Everything about him said he had a lot of money. "That was beautiful," he said to Keiko. His voice was deep and confident. "I have never heard Chopin played like that before." Keiko smiled politely. "Thank you, sir." "Where did you learn to play?" "Like that?" he asked. "I studied in Japan," Keiko said. She was nervous talking to him. He seemed like the kind of person who was used to getting whatever he wanted. "Japan? Interesting." The man looked at her carefully. "I am Robert Sterling, and you are?" Keiko had heard that name before. Robert Sterling was famous for being very rich. He owned technology companies and was always in the business news. She could not believe such an important person was talking. To her, "I am Keiko Tanaka," she said softly. "Well, Miss Tanaka, you have a gift." "A real gift." Robert Sterling pulled out a business card and gave it to her. "I would like to talk to you about a job opportunity. Are you available to meet this week?" Keiko looked at the business card. It was thick and expensive with gold letters. She had never received a business card from someone so important before. "What kind of job?" she asked. "I have many business events and private parties. I need someone who can play piano for my guests. Someone with real talent, not just someone who plays background music." He paused and looked at her again. "Someone like you?" Keiko felt her heart beating fast. This could be the chance she had been waiting for. Working for someone rich and famous could change everything for her. "I already have some small jobs," she said, "but I could have time for more work." Robert Sterling smiled, but something about his smile made Keiko feel uncomfortable. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who always got what he wanted. "Miss Tanaka, what I am offering is not a small job. This would be full-time work, very well paid. You would not need those other little jobs anymore." Keiko could hardly believe what she was hearing. Full-time work with good pay? It sounded too good to be true. "How much would you pay?" she asked quietly. "We can discuss details when we meet. But I promise you, it will be much more than you are making now." "Much more," he looked around the hotel lobby. "You could afford to stay in places like this instead of just working in them." Keiko felt excited and scared at the same time. She had learned to be careful about offers that sounded too good, but this man was famous and successful. Surely he was honest. "What would I have to do exactly?" she asked. "Play piano at my events? Private dinners, business meetings, parties for my friends. You would be my personal pianist." He said the words, "my personal pianist," in a way that made Keiko feel strange, but she pushed the feeling away. "When can we meet to talk about it?" she asked. Robert Sterling checked his expensive watch. "Are you free tomorrow evening?" "I can send a car to pick you up. We can have dinner and discuss everything." A car? Dinner? Keiko had never been treated so well by an employer before. Usually she met people in coffee shops or their offices for a few minutes. "Yes, I am free tomorrow evening," she said. "Good. Give me your address and I will have my driver pick you up at 7 o'clock. He pulled out his phone, ready to type in her information. Keiko gave him her address in Queens, feeling embarrassed about her neighborhood. But Robert Sterling just typed it in without any reaction. "Perfect. Wear something nice." "We are going to a very good restaurant?" He put his phone away and looked at her one more time. "Miss Tanaka, I think this could be the beginning of something very good for both of us." After he walked away, Keiko continued playing piano, but her mind was not on the music. She kept thinking about what had just happened. A real job opportunity, with someone rich and powerful. Maybe her luck was finally changing. The rest of the evening went by quickly. When Keiko finished playing, the hotel manager paid her and said she had done a good job. As she packed up her sheet music, she looked at Robert Sterling's business card again. It felt like a ticket to a new life. On the subway ride home, Keiko could not stop thinking about the meeting tomorrow. She tried to imagine what kind of restaurant they would go to. She had never eaten at a really expensive restaurant before. She wondered what she should wear. Her nicest dress was the one she had borrowed today, but she could not borrow it again so soon. When she got home, Keiko looked through her small closet. She did not have many clothes, and most of them were old or too casual. She decided she would have to buy something new, even though she could not really afford it. This opportunity was too important to risk making a bad impression. That night, Keiko lay in bed thinking about her conversation with Robert Sterling. Something about him had made her feel nervous, but she told herself it was just because he was so important and powerful. She was not used to talking to people like him. She thought about all the possibilities this job could bring. Good money, steady work, maybe even a chance to meet other important people in the music world. This could be her chance to finally build a real career in America. But as she was falling asleep, Keiko remembered the way Robert Sterling had looked at her. It was not the way someone looks at a musician they want to hire. It was different, more personal. She tried to push the thought away, but it stayed in the back of her mind. Tomorrow she would learn more about what he was offering. She hoped it really was the opportunity she had been waiting for. She needed it to be. The black car arrived exactly at 7 o'clock. Keiko watched from her window as it pulled up in front of her building. She had never seen such an expensive car in her neighborhood before. The driver got out and opened the back door, waiting. For her, Keiko had spent her last $50 on a new dress. It was simple but elegant, and she hoped it would be good enough for wherever Robert Sterling was taking her. She felt nervous as she walked down the stairs from her apartment. The driver was polite and professional. He helped her into the car. Without saying much, the inside of the car was more comfortable than her apartment. The seats were soft leather, and there was even a small television. Keiko tried not to look impressed, but she had never been in anything so fancy. The restaurant was in Manhattan, in a part of the city Keiko had never been to before. When they arrived, she saw it was the kind of place where people made reservations months in advance. The doorman opened the car door for her and welcomed her by name. Someone had called ahead to tell them she was coming. Inside, the restaurant was beautiful but intimidating. The lights were low and the tables were far apart for privacy. Everyone spoke in quiet voices. Keiko felt like she did not belong there. But she tried to walk confidently. Robert Sterling was already waiting at a table in the corner. He stood up when he saw her and smiled that same smile from the night before. He was wearing another expensive suit and looked very comfortable in this fancy place. "Miss Tanaka, you look lovely," he said as he helped her sit down. "I hope you are hungry. This restaurant has the best food in the city." The menu had no prices on it. Keiko had heard that only the most expensive restaurants did this. She looked at the options and recognized very few of the dishes. Everything was in French or had ingredients she had never heard of. "Order whatever you like," Robert Sterling said. "Tonight is my treat." Keiko chose something simple that sounded familiar. Robert Sterling ordered wine that he said cost $300 a bottle. Keiko tried not to show her shock. That was more than her rent. During dinner, Robert Sterling asked many questions about Keiko's life. Where she lived, how long she had been in America, what her visa status was. Some of the questions felt very personal, but Keiko answered them because she wanted to make a good impression. "So your visa expires in 6 months, he said after she told him about her situation. "That must be very stressful for you," Keiko nodded. "Yes, I am very worried about it. If I cannot find a way to stay, I will have to go back to Japan." "That would be a waste of your talent," Robert Sterling said. "America needs musicians like you." After they finished eating, Robert Sterling pulled out some papers from his briefcase. "I've prepared a contract for you to look at," he said. "This explains exactly what I am offering." Keiko took the papers and tried to read them, but the language was very difficult. There were many legal words she did not understand. She saw numbers that made her heart race. $200,000 for 1 year of work. $200,000? She asked, not believing what she was reading. "That is correct. Plus, I will help you with your visa situation. I have lawyers who specialize in immigration. They can help you get a work visa, maybe even a green card eventually." Keiko felt dizzy. This was more money than she had ever imagined making. And help with her visa? It was like all her problems were being solved at once. What exactly would I have to do? She asked, trying to focus on the contract. "You would work exclusively for me. That means you cannot play piano for anyone else during the year. You would live in the guest house on my property in the Hamptons. All your food and housing would be provided. You would play at my business events, dinner parties, and any other occasions where I need music." Keiko read more of the contract. Some parts worried her. It said she had to be available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It said she could not leave the property without permission. It said she could not have visitors without approval. "This says I cannot leave without permission," she said. "What does that mean exactly?" Robert Sterling waved his hand like it was not important. "That is just legal language. Of course you can leave. But during business hours I need to know where you are in case I need you to play. It is a security issue. You understand?" Keiko was not sure she did understand, but the money was so much that she tried not to worry about it. $200,000 would change her entire life. She could pay back her parents for music school. She could save money for the future. She would never have to worry about rent or food again. The guest house is very comfortable, Robert, Sterling continued. It has a full kitchen, a beautiful view of the ocean, and of course several pianos for you to practice on. You would have everything you need. Several pianos? Keiko asked. She had been dreaming of playing on real pianos again. Yes, I collect them. Grand pianos, baby grands, even some antique pieces. You would have access to instruments that most pianists only dream of playing. Keiko tried to read more of the contract, but it was very long and complicated. Robert Sterling seemed to notice her struggling with it. I know it looks overwhelming, he said. Legal contracts always do. But it is really very simple. You play piano for me for 1 year, and I pay you. Very well, and help you stay in America. Everyone wins. Can I take this home and read it more carefully? Keiko asked. Robert Sterling's smile changed slightly. It became less warm. Miss Tanaka, I am offering you an opportunity that could change your life, but I need an answer tonight. I have other musicians interested in this position. Keiko felt pressure building in her chest. She wanted time to think, maybe even to show the contract to a lawyer. But Robert Sterling was making it clear that this was a now-or-never situation. I understand you are nervous, he continued. But sometimes in life you have to take risks to get what you want. You told me last night that you have been struggling for 3 years. How much longer do you want to struggle? Keiko thought about her small apartment, her empty refrigerator, her stack of unpaid bills. She thought about her visa expiring and having to go back to Japan as a failure. This contract could solve all of those problems. If I sign this, when would I start? She asked. Immediately. I have a business dinner tomorrow night that I need music for. My driver can pick you up tomorrow morning and take you to the Hamptons. You can pack your things tonight. Everything was happening so fast. Keiko felt confused and overwhelmed. But the money was real, and Robert Sterling was real. He was offering her more than she had ever hoped for. What about my apartment, my lease? Do not worry about that. My assistant will handle everything. Any fees or penalties will be taken care of. Keiko looked at the contract again. The number 200,000 seemed to jump off the page at her. She thought about her parents who had sacrificed so much for her music education. She thought about her dreams of being a real musician in America. I need to ask you something, she said. Why me? You could hire any musician you want. Why choose someone like me? Robert Sterling leaned back in his chair and studied her face. Because you have something special, Miss Tanaka. Something rare, and I always get the best. The way he said, I always get the best, made Keiko feel uncomfortable again. But she pushed the feeling down. This was her chance, maybe her only chance. Do you have a pen? She asked. Robert Sterling smiled widely and pulled an expensive pen from his jacket. I was hoping you would say that. Keiko signed her name at the bottom of the contract. As soon as she finished writing, Robert Sterling took the papers and put them back in his briefcase. Welcome to your new life, Miss Tanaka, he said. I think you are going to be very happy working for me. But as they left the restaurant and got back into the black car, Keiko wondered what exactly she had just agreed to. The next morning, Keiko packed her few belongings into 2 small suitcases. She had not owned much to begin with, and most of her things were old and worn. She felt sad leaving her small apartment, even though it had never felt like home. At least it had been hers. Robert Sterling's driver arrived at 10 o'clock sharp. He helped Keiko carry her suitcases to the car without saying much. During the drive to the Hamptons, Keiko watched the city disappear behind them. She felt nervous and excited at the same time. The drive took almost 2 hours. When they finally arrived at Robert Sterling's property, Keiko could not believe what she saw. The estate was huge, with a long driveway lined with trees. The main house was like a mansion from a movie, with white walls and tall windows. She could see the ocean in the distance. The guest house where she would live was bigger than any apartment she had ever seen. It had a large living room, a full kitchen, a bedroom with a king-size bed, and 2 bathrooms. But the most amazing thing was the music room. It had 3 different pianos, a grand piano, a baby grand, and an upright piano that looked very old and expensive. "This is incredible," Keiko said to herself as she touched the keys of the grand piano. The sound was perfect, rich, and deep. She had never had access to instruments like these. A woman knocked on the door and introduced herself as Maria Santos, the housekeeper. She was a kind-looking woman in her 50s with a warm smile. She helped Keiko settle in and explained how things worked on the estate. "Mr. Sterling likes everything to be perfect," Maria said as she showed Keiko around. "He can be demanding, but if you do good work, he treats you well." "How long have you worked for him?" Keiko asked. 5 years, Maria said. "Before that, I worked for other rich families. Mr. Sterling pays better than most, but ... She paused and looked around like she was checking if anyone was listening. "Just be careful, okay? Do your job and do not ask too many questions." Keiko wondered what Maria meant by that, but before she could ask, her phone rang. It was Robert Sterling. "Miss Tanaka, I hope you are settling in well," he said. His voice sounded different on the phone, more cold and businesslike. "Yes, thank you. The guest house is beautiful, and the pianos are amazing." "Good. I need you." "To play tonight at a business dinner?" 8 o'clock in the main house. "Wear something elegant. Maria will show you where to go." "What kind of music would you like me to play?" Keiko asked. "Classical music, nothing too loud or dramatic. My guests will be talking business. You are background music, nothing more." The way he said background music made Keiko feel small. She was used to being ignored, but something about his tone was different. It was like he was reminding her of her place. That evening, Keiko dressed in her best clothes and walked to the main house. Maria met her at the door and led her to a large dining room. The table was set for 8 people with expensive china and crystal glasses. The room was beautiful but felt cold. Robert Sterling was already there with his guests. They were all men, in expensive suits, talking loudly about business deals and money. When Keiko sat down at the piano, none of them looked at her or said hello. She might as well have been invisible. Keiko played softly for 2 hours while the men ate and talked. They discussed buying companies, firing workers, and making millions of dollars. Their conversations made her uncomfortable. They talked about people like they were objects to be bought and sold. During a break between songs, she heard Robert Sterling talking to one of his guests. "Yes, I just acquired her," he said. "Very talented. Cost me quite a bit, but she is worth it." Keiko realized he was talking about her. The way he said acquired her made her feel sick. It sounded like he was talking about buying a car or a piece of art, not hiring a musician. After the dinner ended, Robert Sterling walked over to the piano. "You did well tonight," he said. "But next time, play quieter. My guests should barely notice you are there." "I thought I was playing quietly," Keiko said. "Not quiet enough. Remember, you are here to serve my needs, not to perform concerts." His voice was sharp, not at all like the friendly man from the restaurant. Keiko nodded and gathered her sheet music. As she walked back to the guest house, she felt confused. Robert Sterling was treating her very differently than he had during their dinner meeting. But she told herself it was just because he was busy with important business. Over the next few weeks, Keiko fell into a routine. She practiced piano during the day and played at Robert Sterling's events in the evenings. The events were usually business dinners or parties for his wealthy friends. The people never talked to her or seemed to care about her music. At first, Keiko enjoyed having access to such beautiful pianos. She could practice for hours without worrying about bothering neighbors. The guest house was comfortable, and she did not have to worry about money for food or rent. But slowly she began to feel trapped. Robert Sterling called her several times every day, asking where she was and what she was doing. If she went for a walk on the beach, he wanted to know exactly when she left and when she would be back. If she wanted to go to the store, she had to ask permission first. "It is for security reasons," he always said. "I need to know where my employees are at all times." But Keiko noticed that Maria and the other workers could come and go freely. Only she had to ask permission for everything. One day, Keiko asked, if she could go into town to buy some personal items. Robert Sterling said no because he might need her to practice for an event that weekend. But then the weekend came and there was no event. When she asked about it, he said the plans had changed. Keiko started to feel like she was in prison, even though it was a beautiful prison. She had everything she needed materially, but she felt more alone than ever. She was not allowed to have visitors, and Robert Sterling discouraged her from making friends with the other workers. "You are different from them," he told her. "You are an artist. You should not waste time with the help." The way he talked about the other workers bothered. Keiko, Maria, and the others were kind people who worked hard. But Robert Sterling acted like they were beneath him. After a month, Keiko began to understand what Maria had meant when she said to be careful. Robert Sterling was controlling every part of her life. He decided what she wore to his events, what music she played, even what food was delivered to her guest house. When she tried to order different food, he said it was not healthy enough for a performer. When she wanted to wear a dress he had not approved, he said it was not appropriate for his guests. Everything had to be exactly the way he wanted it. Keiko also noticed that Robert Sterling watched her more than seemed normal. Sometimes she would see him looking at her through the windows of the main house. Other times she would turn around and find him standing behind her, just watching. When she asked what he needed, he would make up some excuse about checking on her work. One evening, after playing at another boring business dinner, Robert Sterling followed her back to the guest house. He had never done this before, and it made Keiko nervous. "Miss Tanaka, you seem unhappy lately," he said as he sat down in her living room without being invited. "I am fine, Mr. Sterling," Keiko said, standing by the door. "Are you? Because if you are not happy with our arrangement, perhaps we need to discuss some changes to your contract." The way he said changes sounded like a threat. Keiko remembered that the contract said he could fire her at any time, and if he did, she would have to pay back all the money he had already given her. "I am very happy," she said quickly. "Thank you for this opportunity." Robert Sterling smiled, but it was not a nice smile. "Good, because, if this arrangement does not work out, it would be very difficult for you to find other work in this country. I know a lot of people in the music business." Keiko felt cold fear in her stomach. Was he threatening to ruin her career if she tried to leave? "I understand," she said quietly. "I knew you were smart," Robert Sterling said as he stood up to leave. "Sleep well, Miss Tanaka. Tomorrow we have another dinner party, and I want you at your best." After he left, Keiko locked the door and sat on her bed. For the first time since signing the contract, she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. The money was good and the living conditions were comfortable, but she was starting to feel like she had sold more than just her musical services. She thought about calling her parents, but what would she tell them? That she was living like a prisoner in a golden cage? They would worry, and there was nothing they could do to help her from so far away. That night, Keiko lay awake thinking about her situation. She was stuck in a contract for 11 more months with a man who seemed to think he owned her. She had money but no freedom. She had beautiful pianos but no joy in playing them as she listened to the ocean waves outside her window. Keiko wondered if this was what success in America really looked like. 3 months into her contract, Keiko began to see Robert Sterling's true nature more clearly. What had seemed like kindness in the beginning was actually control. What had looked like generosity was really possession. She was not an employee. She was something he owned. The breaking point came on a cold February evening. Robert Sterling was hosting a dinner for some business rivals, men he was trying to intimidate with his wealth and power. He had told Keiko to dress in a specific white dress he had bought for her and to play only the most dramatic and powerful pieces she knew. "I want them to understand what class looks like," he had said. "You are part of my display of superiority." Keiko felt sick hearing him talk about her like she was a piece of art or furniture. But she needed this job, so she did what he asked. She wore the white dress and played the dramatic music while the men argued about business deals. After dinner, one of Robert Sterling's guests, a man named Richards, had too much to drink. He came over to the piano while Keiko was playing and put his hand on her shoulder in a way that made her very uncomfortable. "You play beautifully," he said, standing too close to her. "Sterling, where did you find such a lovely little thing?" "She is quite special," Robert Sterling replied, watching from across the room with that cold smile. "Very obedient and talented." The way they talked about her, like she was not even there, made Keiko's face burn with anger and shame. But worse was, what happened next? Richards moved his hand from her shoulder to her back. Rubbing it in a way that was clearly inappropriate, Keiko stopped playing and moved away from him. "Please do not touch me," she said firmly. Richards laughed. "Oh, she has spirit too. I like that." Keiko looked at Robert Sterling, expecting him to say something to protect her. But he just stood there watching like this was entertainment for him. She realized he was not going to help her. In fact, he seemed to enjoy seeing her uncomfortable. "Please excuse me," Keiko said, standing up from the piano bench. "I need to take a break." "Sit back down," Robert Sterling said sharply. "You are not finished playing." "I said I need a break?" Keiko repeated, her voice shaking with anger. The room went quiet. Everyone was staring at her. Robert Sterling's face turned dark with anger, but he could not make a scene in front of his guests. "Of course," he said through gritted teeth. "Take your time." Keiko walked quickly to the guest house, her heart pounding. She had never stood up to Robert Sterling before, and she was scared about what would happen next. But she was also proud of herself for finally saying no. 20 minutes later, there was a hard knock on her door. Robert Sterling came in without waiting for her to answer. His face was red with anger. "How dare you embarrass me in front of my guests?" he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Your guest was touching me inappropriately," Keiko said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I have the right to stop that." "You have the right to do what I tell you to do," Robert Sterling said, stepping closer to her. "Nothing more. You work for me. You belong to me." "I do not belong to anyone," Keiko said, backing away from him. "I am here to play piano, not to be touched by drunk men." Robert Sterling laughed, but it was not a nice laugh. "You still do not understand, do you? You are in this country because I allow it. You have money because I give it to you. You have a place to live because I provide it. Without me, you are nothing." His words hit Keiko like a physical blow. She realized he was right about some things. She was dependent on him for everything. But that did not mean he owned her soul. "I signed a contract to play piano," she said. "Not to be anyone's property." "Read your contract again, Miss Tanaka. Read it very carefully. You will find that you agreed to be available for whatever I need, whenever I need it." His smile was cruel now. "And if you continue to disobey me, I can make your life very difficult." After he left, Keiko did read her contract again. She had been so excited about the money that she had not paid attention to some of the details. Now she saw clauses that scared her. If she broke the contract, she would have to pay back all the money immediately. If she was fired for bad behavior, she could be sued for damages. And there was a clause about being available for any duties as required by the employer. Keiko began to understand that she had signed away more than her time. She had signed away her freedom. The next morning, Maria came to clean the guest house. She looked worried when she saw Keiko's sad face. "Are you okay, Mia?" Maria asked gently. Keiko wanted to tell someone about what had happened, but she was afraid. What if Maria told Robert Sterling what she said? "I am fine," Keiko led Maria. Looked at her carefully. "You know, I have worked for many rich men. Some are good bosses, some are not so good. But Mr. Sterling—" She paused and looked around to make sure no one was listening. "He is different. He likes to control people. Especially young women." "What do you mean?" Keiko asked. "Before you, he had another girl working here, a singer from Russia. Very beautiful. Very talented. At first, everything was good, but then—" Maria shook her head. She left in the middle of the night. Never said goodbye, never came back for her things. Keiko felt cold. What happened to her, I do not know. But she was very scared the last time I saw her. She tried to tell me something, but she was too afraid to speak clearly. That afternoon, while Robert Sterling was in the city for business, Keiko decided to explore the main house. She had never been allowed in most of the rooms, and she was curious about what else might be hidden there. In Robert Sterling's office, she found something that made her blood run cold. There was a folder on his desk labeled Personal Projects. Inside were photographs and documents about several young women. All of them were musicians or artists from other countries. All of them looked scared in their photos. Keiko recognized one of them. It must have been the Russian singer Maria had mentioned. There were contracts similar to hers, but some had additional clauses that were even more disturbing. Some mentioned personal services and private performances. At the bottom of the folder was a document that made Keiko's hands shake. It was a list of important men, including some she had met at Robert Sterling's dinners. Next to each name was information about their preferences for entertainment. Some of the notes were clearly about the women Robert Sterling had hired. Keiko realized she was not just an employee. She was part of some kind of business that Robert Sterling ran, providing young female artists to wealthy men for their entertainment. The thought made her feel sick. She quickly put everything back where she found it and ran back to the guest house. Her mind was racing. She had to get out of this situation, but how? She had no money saved because Robert Sterling controlled all her finances. She had no car and was miles from the nearest town. And if she tried to leave, he had threatened to ruin her career and have her deported, but staying was becoming more dangerous every day. Robert Sterling was getting bolder about touching her inappropriately during their private meetings. He made comments about her body and asked personal questions that had nothing to do with music. She could see in his eyes that he was planning something worse. That night, Keiko started planning her escape. She could not leave immediately. She needed time to figure out how to do it safely, but she began to prepare. She hid small amounts of cash whenever she could. She memorized the phone numbers of immigration lawyers she found online. And most importantly, she started documenting everything Robert Sterling did and said. Keiko used her phone to record their conversations whenever possible. She took pictures of documents when she could get into his office. She wrote down dates and details of every inappropriate thing he did. If she was going to escape, she needed evidence of what he was really doing. The hardest part was pretending that everything was normal. She had to continue playing piano at his events and smiling when he introduced her to his guests. She had to act grateful for the opportunity he had given her, even though she now understood it was really a trap, but inside, Keiko was changing. The scared, desperate girl who had signed the contract was becoming a stronger woman who refused to be anyone's victim. She had survived 3 years of poverty and struggle in New York. She could survive this too. One evening, as she played piano for another group of Robert Sterling's horrible friends, Keiko made a decision. She was going to find a way to expose what he was doing, not just to save herself, but to protect other young women from falling into the same trap. She looked up from the piano and saw Robert Sterling watching her with that possessive smile. But this time, instead of feeling afraid, Keiko felt angry. He thought he had broken her spirit, but he was wrong. He had only made her stronger. The fight was just beginning. Keiko's discovery came by accident. She was looking for sheet music in Robert Sterling's office when she found a hidden door behind a bookshelf. The door was slightly open, and she could see stairs leading down to what looked like a basement room. Curiosity overcame her fear. She quietly went down the stairs and found herself in a room full of recording equipment. There were cameras, microphones, and editing machines that looked very expensive. But what shocked her most were the screens showing different rooms in the house, including her guest house. Keiko felt sick as she realized Robert Sterling had been watching her all this time. There were cameras in her bedroom, her bathroom, everywhere she thought she had privacy. But worse than that, she saw shelves full of recordings labeled with dates and names. She found a box with her name on it. Inside were dozens of recordings of her playing piano, but also recordings of her private moments in the guest house. There were videos of her getting dressed, taking showers, sleeping. She felt violated and angry in a way she had never felt before. But then she found something that changed everything. There was another box labeled Sales Records, and inside were documents showing that Robert Sterling was selling these recordings online. Her performances, her private moments, everything was being sold to people around the world. The documents showed he had made millions of dollars from recordings of her and the other women who had worked for him before. The Russian singer Maria had mentioned 2 other women from Europe, and now all of them had been secretly recorded and their privacy sold for profit. Keiko took pictures of everything with her phone, her hands shaking with anger. She had to be very careful not to get caught, but she needed evidence of what Robert Sterling was doing over the next few days. Keiko learned more about Robert Sterling's business. She discovered he had a whole network of wealthy men who paid high prices for these recordings. Some of them were the same men who came to his dinner parties and business meetings. She also found contracts showing that some of the women had been forced to do much worse things than just play music. There were agreements for private shows and personal entertainment that made Keiko feel sick to read. Keiko realized she was in more danger than she had thought. The contract she had signed was just the beginning. Robert Sterling was slowly building up to asking her to do more than just play piano. The inappropriate touching, the personal questions, the way he watched her, it was all part of his plan to control her completely. She had to act fast, but she also had to be smart. If Robert Sterling discovered what she knew, there was no telling what he might do to stop her from exposing him. One evening, Robert Sterling called Keiko to the main house for what he said was an important conversation. She found him in his office, sitting behind his big desk with a drink in his hand. He looked relaxed, but Keiko could see something dangerous in his eyes. "Miss Tanaka, please sit down," he said, pointing to a chair across from his desk. "We need to discuss the next phase of your employment." Keiko sat down, trying to look calm even though her heart was racing. "You have been with me for 4 months. Now," Robert Sterling continued, "you have proven that you are talented and mostly obedient. Now, I think you are ready for additional responsibilities." "What kind of responsibilities?" Keiko asked, though she was afraid she already knew. Robert Sterling pulled out a new contract and placed it on the desk between them. "Some of my business associates have expressed special interest in your performances. They would like more private shows, more personal attention." Keiko looked at the contract without touching it. She could see it was very different from her original agreement. There were clauses about intimate performances and personal services that made her stomach turn. "I do not understand," she said, pretending to be confused. "I thought I was hired to play piano," Robert Sterling laughed. "Oh, Miss Tanaka, you are so innocent. Did you really think someone would pay $200,000 just for background music at dinner parties?" His words confirmed what Keiko had suspected. The piano playing had just been a way to get her here. Now he wanted her to do things that had nothing to do with music. "I am not interested in doing anything other than playing piano," Keiko said firmly. Robert Sterling's smile disappeared. "I am afraid you do not have a choice. Your current contract has some clauses that you may have forgotten about. Let me remind you." He pulled out her original contract and pointed to a section near the bottom. "You agreed to be available for any duties as required by the employer. That means anything I ask you to do." "That does not mean what you are suggesting," Keiko said, her voice shaking with anger. "Actually, it means exactly what I want it to mean. You see, Miss Tanaka, you are in this country on a visa that I sponsored. If I withdraw my sponsorship, you will be deported immediately. And if you try to fight me, I have recordings of our conversations where you agreed to these additional duties." Keiko knew he was lying about the recordings, but she also knew he had the power to make her life very difficult. She needed time to think and plan. "Can I have some time to consider this?" she asked. "Of course," Robert Sterling said, his smile returning. "But do not take too long. My associates are very eager to meet you privately. I have promised them something special next week." As Keiko walked back to the guest house, her mind was racing. She had 1 week to figure out how to escape before Robert Sterling forced her into a situation that would destroy her life completely. That night, She called a number she had found online for a legal aid society that helped immigrants. She spoke to a lawyer named James Chun, who specialized in cases involving exploitation of foreign workers. "What you are describing sounds like human trafficking," James Chun said after Keiko told him her situation. "Do you have any evidence of what this man is doing?" "Yes," Keiko said. "I have photographs and recordings, but I'm afraid to leave because he controls my visa status." "That is exactly how these criminals operate," James said. "They use immigration fears to control their victims, but there are laws to protect people like you. Can you meet me somewhere safe to discuss this further?" Keiko explained that she was not allowed to leave the property without permission. James Chen told her about organizations that could help her escape safely, but she needed to be very careful about how she contacted them over the next few days. Keiko continued gathering evidence while pretending to consider Robert Sterling's new contract. She took more pictures of the recording equipment and the sales documents. She also started copying files from his computer. When she could get into his office, what she found was even worse than she had imagined. Robert Sterling was running a large operation that exploited young female artists from other countries. He had connections with traffickers who helped him find vulnerable women, and he had clients all over the world who paid for private recordings and experiences. Keiko also discovered that she was not the first woman to try to expose him. The Russian singer Maria had apparently tried to go to the police, but Robert Sterling had used his wealth and connections to discredit her. She had been deported before she could testify against him, but Keiko had something the other women did not have: solid evidence of his crimes. The recordings and documents she had photographed could prove what he was doing. She just needed to get them to the right people without getting caught. 3 days before Robert Sterling's deadline, Keiko made her decision. She could not wait any longer to escape. She contacted James Chun and told him she was ready to leave and expose everything she had discovered. "We will need to move very carefully," James warned her. "If this man has as much power as you say, he will try to stop you. But with the evidence you have gathered, we can build a strong case against him." Keiko began planning her escape for the night of Robert Sterling's next big dinner party. While he was busy entertaining his guests, she would slip away and meet the people who had promised to help her get to safety. She had been Robert Sterling's prisoner for almost 5 months, but soon she would be free. And when she was free, she would make sure that everyone knew what kind of monster he really was. The thought of finally fighting back gave Keiko strength she had not felt in months. Robert Sterling thought he had broken her spirit, but he was about to learn that some people cannot be owned, no matter how much money and power you have. The night of Robert Sterling's most important investor dinner, Keiko knew it was her only chance to escape. He had been planning this event for weeks, trying to convince wealthy investors to put money into his technology companies. The guest list included some of the richest and most powerful people in the country. Keiko had been practicing a special performance for the evening. Robert Sterling wanted her to play dramatic classical pieces to impress his guests and show off his wealth and taste. He had no idea that Keiko was planning to use this performance to tell her story and expose his crimes. Maria helped Keiko get ready, though she did not know about the escape plan. As Maria helped her into the elegant black dress Robert Sterling had chosen, she whispered, "Be careful tonight, Mia. Mr. Sterling seems very excited about something." More excited than usual. Keiko knew why he was excited. After the dinner, he expected her to sign the new contract and begin providing personal services to his business associates. He had made it clear that refusing was not an option. "I will be careful," Keiko promised Maria. She wanted to thank Maria for her kindness over the past months, but she could not risk telling her about the escape plan. At 7 o'clock. Keiko walked to the main house carrying her sheet music. Hidden inside the music folder were copies of all the evidence she had gathered: photographs of the recording equipment, documents showing the sales of illegal recordings, and proof of Robert Sterling's human trafficking operation. The dining room was filled with 30 of Robert Sterling's most important guests. Keiko recognized some of them from business magazines and news programs. These were people who controlled billions of dollars and had influence over government policies. But they had no idea they were about to witness the exposure of a criminal. James Chun, the lawyer who had been helping Keiko, had arranged for several people to be at the dinner. They looked like regular guests, but they were actually investigators and journalists who were ready to document whatever happened that evening. Robert Sterling introduced Keiko to his guests as his personal pianist and bragged about discovering her talent. The way he talked about her made Keiko feel sick, like she was a possession he was showing off. "Miss Tanaka will now perform some classical pieces for your entertainment," Robert Sterling announced. "She is truly exceptional, as you will see." Keiko sat down at the grand piano and looked out at the room full of wealthy, powerful people. Her hands were shaking, but not from nervousness. She was shaking with anger and determination. Instead of playing the classical pieces Robert Sterling expected, Keiko began to play a song she had composed herself. It was a piece that told the story of a young woman who came to America with dreams, only to be trapped by a powerful man who wanted to control her life. The music started soft and hopeful, representing her dreams when she first arrived in New York. Then it became darker and more frightening, showing her desperation and fear when she realized she was trapped. The guests stopped talking and began to listen as the music told a story that was both beautiful and terrifying. As she played, Keiko began to speak, her voice carrying over the music. "This song is about a young woman who thought she had found an opportunity in America, but she discovered that some opportunities are really traps." Robert Sterling stood up from his chair, his face turning red with anger. "Miss Tanaka, please stick to the program we discussed." But Keiko continued playing and speaking. This young woman was told she would be playing piano for business events. But she found out that her employer was secretly recording her private moments and selling those recordings for profit. The guests were now staring at Keiko with shock and confusion. Some of them looked at Robert Sterling, wondering what was happening. She discovered that her employer was running a business that exploited young women from other countries. He used their immigration status to control them and force them to do things they never agreed to do. "Stop this immediately," Robert Sterling shouted, moving toward the piano. But James Chun and two other men stood up from their seats and blocked his path. "Let her finish," James Chun said calmly. "I think your guests deserve to hear the whole story." Keiko's music reached its climax as she revealed the most shocking part of her story. The young woman found recording equipment hidden in her employer's house. She discovered that he had been filming her without permission and selling those recordings to men around the world. She found evidence that other women before her had been forced into much worse situations. The room was completely silent now except for Keiko's music. Even the servants had stopped moving to listen to her words. "Tonight, this young woman chooses freedom over fear," Keiko said as her music moved toward its conclusion. "Tonight, she tells the truth about what happens to some immigrant women in America when powerful men think they can own them." As the last notes of her song faded away, Keiko stood up from the piano bench. She pulled out the folder of evidence she had hidden in her sheet music and held it up for everyone to see. "Everything I have said tonight can be proven with documents and recordings that I have gathered over the past month," she announced. "Mr. Sterling is running a criminal operation that traffics and exploits young women. I'm not the first victim, and if he is not stopped, I will not be the last." Robert Sterling was screaming at his security guards to grab Keiko, but several of the guests were now standing between them. Some of the investors looked horrified and angry that they had been brought to a dinner where they were witnessing what appeared to be a human trafficking operation. James Chun took the evidence folder from Keiko and announced to the room, "My name is James Chun and I am an attorney specializing in human trafficking cases. Miss Tanaka contacted me 3 weeks ago about Mr. Sterling's illegal activities. We have been working with federal investigators to gather evidence." As if on cue, the dining room doors opened and federal agents entered the room. They were followed by police officers and FBI investigators who had been waiting outside for Keiko's signal. "Robert Sterling, you are under arrest for human trafficking," sexual exploitation, illegal recording, and immigration fraud, announced. The lead FBI agent. The room erupted in chaos as the agents moved to arrest Robert Sterling and secure the evidence. Some guests tried to leave, but they were asked to stay for questioning. Others were taking videos with their phones as the shocking scene unfolded. Keiko watched as Robert Sterling was put in handcuffs. For a moment, their eyes met across the room. His expression was full of rage and disbelief that she had outsmarted him, but Keiko felt no fear anymore. She felt strong and proud that she had found the courage to fight back. As the agents led Robert Sterling away, he turned back and shouted at Keiko, "You have no idea what you have done. I will destroy you for this." But his threats no longer had any power over her. James Chin put his hand on Keiko's shoulder and said, "You are safe now. He cannot hurt you anymore." Maria appeared at Keiko's side, tears in her eyes. "I am so proud of you, Mia. I always knew you were strong, but I never imagined you were this brave." The investigators told Keiko that they would need her to answer many questions and possibly testify in court, but they assured her that she would be protected. They also told her that her actions had likely saved other women from becoming Robert Sterling's victims. As Keiko left the mansion that night, she looked back at the place that had been her prison for 5 months. Tomorrow, news of Robert Sterling's arrest would be in newspapers and on television around the world. Her story would help other women understand that they did not have to accept abuse from powerful men. Keiko had come to America with dreams of being a famous pianist. She had not expected to become famous for exposing a criminal, but she was proud of what she had accomplished. She had found her voice and she had used it to fight for justice. The scared, desperate young woman who had signed Robert Sterling's contract no longer existed. In her place was a strong woman who refused to be anyone's victim. Keiko's real life in America was just beginning. 6 months after Robert Sterling's arrest, Keiko stood backstage at Carnegie Hall, preparing for the most important performance of her life. The concert hall was sold out, with people who had heard her story and wanted to support her music. But tonight was about more than just music. It was about freedom, courage, and the power of speaking truth. The investigation into Robert Sterling's crimes had revealed an operation even larger than Keiko had imagined. Federal agents found evidence that he had exploited over 20 young women from different countries over the past 10 years. The recordings and documents Keiko had gathered became crucial evidence that helped convict him on multiple charges. Robert Sterling was sentenced to 25 years in prison for human trafficking, sexual exploitation, fraud, and dozens of other crimes. His business empire collapsed as investors fled and his companies were investigated for other illegal activities. The mansion in the Hamptons was sold, and the money was used to compensate his victims, but the legal victory was just the beginning of Keiko's new life. James Chen had helped her get permanent resident status through a special visa program for crime victims who assist law enforcement. She no longer had to fear deportation or depend on anyone else for her right to stay in America. The media attention from the case had brought Keiko's musical talent to the attention of the right people. Record companies, concert halls, and music schools all wanted to work with her. But Keiko was careful about the opportunities she chose. She had learned to read contracts very carefully and to never sign anything without understanding every word. A well-known music manager named Sarah Williams had offered to represent Keiko, and after months of careful consideration, Keiko decided to work with her. Sarah was a woman who had built her reputation on treating artists fairly and helping them maintain control over their careers. "Your story is powerful, but your music is what will make your career last," Sarah had told Keiko during their first meeting. "We will never exploit what you went through. We will focus on your talent and let your music speak for itself." Tonight's concert at Carnegie Hall was titled "Songs of Freedom" and featured pieces that Keiko had composed during and after her ordeal with Robert Sterling. The music told the story of her journey from victim to survivor to victor, but it also spoke to the experiences of other women who had faced similar challenges. Keiko had used part of the money from her first recording contract to start a foundation called safe harbor that helped immigrant artists navigate the music industry safely. The foundation provided legal advice, housing assistance, and career guidance to young musicians from other countries who were trying to build careers in America. Maria Santos had become the foundation's first employee. After Robert Sterling's arrest, she had lost her job at the mansion, but Keiko immediately offered her a position helping other women who found themselves in dangerous situations. Maria's warmth and experience made her perfect for helping frightened young women feel safe and supported. "You saved my life," Maria had told Keiko when she offered her the job. "Now let me help save others." The foundation had already helped 15 young women escape from exploitative situations similar to Keiko's. They worked with law enforcement and immigration attorneys to make sure that other criminals like Robert Sterling were caught and prosecuted. As Keiko waited to go on stage at Carnegie Hall, she thought about how much her life had changed. A year ago, she had been playing piano in subway stations for a few dollars. Tonight, she was about to perform for an audience that included some of the most important people in the music world. But the most meaningful part of the evening was knowing that several of Robert Sterling's other victims were in the audience. The Russian singer Maria had mentioned, whose real name was Anya, had returned to the United States to testify in the trial. She was now rebuilding her own career and had become one of Keiko's closest friends, 2 other women who had escaped from Robert Sterling's operation were also there, along with several women the foundation had helped. Seeing them free and successful was more rewarding to Keiko than any applause or recognition she might receive. James Chun was in the audience too, along with some of the FBI agents who had worked on the case. They had become not just her legal team, but her friends. They had seen her transform from a frightened victim into a confident advocate for other women's rights. Sarah Williams came backstage to check on Keiko before the performance. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Nervous," Keiko admitted. "But good nervous, ready nervous. The audience is very excited to hear you play. There are music critics here from all the major newspapers and magazines. This could really launch your career to the next level." Keiko nodded, but she was not thinking about critics or her career. She was thinking about the young woman who had signed Robert Sterling's contract almost a year ago. That woman had been desperate, scared, and willing to accept almost anything for a chance at success. Now, Keiko understood that real success was not just about money or fame. It was about maintaining your dignity, helping others, and using your talents to make the world a better place. The stage manager announced that it was time for the concert to begin. Keiko walked out onto the stage of Carnegie Hall and saw 2,000 people standing to applaud her before she had even played a single note. As she sat down at the beautiful grand piano, Keiko felt a peace she had never experienced before. She was exactly where she belonged, doing exactly what she was meant to do. She began to play the first piece, a composition she had written about her early days in New York when she was struggling but still hopeful. The music was beautiful and sad, but it was also full of determination and strength. As she moved through the program, Keiko told her story through music. Each piece represented a different part of her journey: the desperation that led her to sign Robert Sterling's contract, the fear and confusion of realizing she was trapped, the anger and determination that helped her fight back, and finally, the joy and freedom of her new life. The final piece of the evening was the same song she had played the night she exposed Robert Sterling's crimes. But tonight it sounded different. The fear and desperation were still there in the music, but they were overwhelmed by hope and triumph. When Keiko finished playing, the audience stood and applauded for almost 10 minutes. But the moment that meant the most to her was when she saw Anya and the other survivors standing in the front row, tears streaming down their faces as they clapped. After the concert, there was a reception where Keiko met with music industry leaders, journalists, and supporters of her foundation. Everyone wanted to congratulate her on her performance and her courage in speaking out against Robert Sterling, but the conversation that meant the most to her was with a young woman from Colombia who approached her near the end of the evening. "Miss Tanaka," the woman said in heavily accented English, I heard about your foundation. I think I need help. There is a man who says he wants to help my singing career, but something does not feel right about his offer. Keiko took the woman's hand and smiled. Come with me. I want you to meet Maria Santos. She will help you figure out if this opportunity is real or if it is a trap, and either way, we will make sure you are safe. As Keiko watched Maria take the young singer aside to talk privately, she felt a deep satisfaction. This was why she had survived everything Robert Sterling had done to her. Not just to save herself, but to be able to save others. Later that night, Keiko sat in her new apartment in Manhattan, looking out at the city lights. She had a comfortable home, a successful career, and meaningful work helping other women. She had everything she had dreamed of when she first came to America, but she had gained it in a way she never could have imagined. Her phone rang, and she saw it was her parents calling from Japan. They had watched a live stream of her concert and wanted to tell her how proud they were. "We always knew you were special," her mother said through happy tears. "But we never imagined you would become so strong and brave." "I learned that I had to be strong," Keiko told her parents. "But I also learned that being strong does not mean facing everything alone. The most important thing is to find people who will help you and then help others when you can." After she hung up the phone, Keiko went to her piano, a beautiful instrument she had bought with money from her first recording contract. She played softly, not practicing for any performance, just enjoying the music for its own sake. As she played, Keiko thought about all the young women around the world who were facing the same choices she had faced. Some of them would be tempted by offers that seemed too good to be true. Some of them would fall into traps set by people like Robert Sterling, but now there were resources to help them. There were foundations like Safe Harbor, lawyers like James Chun, and survivors like herself who could warn them about the dangers and help them find legitimate opportunities. Keiko's story had become bigger than just her own experience. It had become a symbol of hope for anyone who felt powerless against people with money and influence. It showed that even the most powerful criminals could be defeated if their victims found the courage to speak up and fight back. As she finished playing and prepared for bed, Keiko smiled, thinking about her schedule for tomorrow.